Gypsy Joe Harris was unique. It was misinterpreted, they called him a clown, but he wasn't a clown.
Anything you couldn't predict, he would do it. Drop his hands, he'd stick out his chin, he'd roll his eyes, he'd roll his body, he'd duck under punches. He was a remarkable fighter to watch in terms of excitement.
The best comment I ever saw about Gypsy Joe Harris, the late Stan Hochman, a columnist for the Philadelphia Daily News, once wrote, Gypsy Joe Harris fought like a man who had a fire in his pants.
I love the Gypsy Joe Harris. I mean, I just think the way he fought and everything, I thought he had everything of being a world champion. Gypsy was a real crafty little guy. I mean, he was going to beat most of the guys out there.
He was like 5'5", and he only lost one fight.
He was one of these guys, he'd go to the corner, put his arms on the ropes, and duck every fucking punch, you know?
He was very unorthodox. He was a street kid. He was unreliable, missed pre-fight physicals, pre-fight press conferences, hang out in pool rooms on Columbia Avenue in North Philly. But he always showed up the night of the fight, and he always won.
He was another guy that wouldn't train. He could come off the street and go 10 rounds.
Unorthodox inside the ring and outside the ring. He was very flamboyant.
Unlike a lot of defensive fighters, he made you pay, not just made you miss, because he was really fast.
He was like Jersey Joe Walcott in fast motion.
His robes were made out of velvet and out of satin, and he was something that the fans in Philadelphia took to him. He was much more popular than Joe Frazier, who became heavyweight champ. They just loved him. He'd sell out the arena. He fought all the top contenders, Kitten Haywood and Miguel Barreto at his time.
And I remember he fought at the arena.
Yeah.
The arena was at 45th and Market. On a rainy night, the arena was sold out. And I still remember he had this red outfit.
Today, people don't want to see boxing. They want to see a drag out, knockdown, and they take a guy like Gypsy Joe. He's colorful, he's a crowd pleaser. Everybody seems to go for him.
He was the first fighter ever to be on the cover of Sports Illustrated who was not a heavyweight and was not a world champion.
He was trained by Yank Durham, who had Joe Frazier at the time. And of course, they gave most of the attention to Joe Frazier. But Gypsy Joe was selling out arenas when he was a preliminary fighter. He was much more popular in Philadelphia than Joe Frazier. It's hard to believe, but he was, because he was so unique. He looked like a little gnome. He was, he wore tassels and bells and stuff, but people weren't really doing that.
He was ahead of his time. He was ahead of Hector Camacho. Gypsy Joe was the first fighter I ever saw that had the bells on his laces.
We both from North Philly, and he's my cousin, and we both trained at 23rd and Powell. Joe Frazier, Benny Briscoe, Jimmy Young, Al Massey, all us trained at 23rd and Powell.
He was a Philadelphia fighter, which, when quote Philadelphia fighter, at that time had a cachet to it. If you were a successful Philadelphia fighter, you were tough, impressive. You were good.
They had a thing in Philadelphia. It's a big thing. I want to be the champion of the Passyunk gym. I want to be the champion of whatever, the PAL gym. I want to be. And they had wars. There were training sessions, but they weren't training. It was life and death. Gypsy Joe was a terrific fighter.
He was beating good fighters, and the other fighters never knew what to expect from him. Nobody could figure out how to fight him. And he beat Curtis Cokes.
He beat Curtis Cokes in the Garden. Embarrassed him in the Garden. Cokes was a very underrated fighter. Would he have beaten him in a rematch? Who knows?
He fought the non-title bout with Curtis Cokes. It was a 10-round bout, and he won a decision in a non-title fight against Cokes. And they were all set to do the rematch. And in the middle of it, Gypsy Joe Harris did not show up for the weigh-in.
Do you know why there wasn't a rematch with Cokes for the title?
Well, there was a rematch signed. He had a tune-up fight in Dallas against a guy named Benny Bowser. Gypsy Joe did, and to make himself get him acquainted with the Dallas fans. But I remember in the weeks leading up to the rematch for the title, there was a lot of talk that he wasn't going to make weight, and he wasn't making weight in those days. So Cokes literally got on the scale at the weigh-in, but Gypsy didn't show up.
Unfortunately, in his last fight, He went up against Emile Griffith, who at the time was probably pound for pound the best boxer in the world. Emile just had too much experience for him.
Gypsy Joe. Oh, I like Gypsy's, my friend. They all said that his eye was bad when he fought me. If the doctor gave him permission to fight, that means it's okay. But I didn't know that he was hurt with his eye or anything like that.
I mean, he beat Curtis Coates, but as soon as he got in there with a guy like Emile Griffith that took him to school, that was the whole thing. And then Gypsy had another problem. He liked the streets.
After we train or before we train sometime, we go to this restaurant on Columbia Avenue and buy a bowl of beans and rice, pay the quarter. We used to hustle on Columbia Avenue. We used to shoot crap on the corner and everything.
And I spoke to Emile years ago, and we were talking about a number of different things. In passing, he just happened to say, I always wonder what Gypsy Joe would have been like. He knew that he'd be, I don't say half a fighter, but not a complete fighter.
He had one eye that was blind since he started boxing. And that's why he developed this style, because he always had to have his good eye on the fighter.
They asked him, how did you get by? He says, when they said for me to cover my eye, I would cover the bad eye, read the chart. Then when they said cover the other eye, I would take the other hand and cover the same blind eye, and they never noticed it.
He kept it secret. With a great, I think the promoters were in on it because he sold tickets.
Do you know how he passed the commission test all those years?
Money. He was the hottest attraction in Philly.
Why they finally took his license away is they were starting to lose money because they'd get a promotion together, he wouldn't be in shape or he wouldn't show up, and they'd already made a lot of money off him. They decided to cut their losses.
After he lost that 12-round fight to Griffith, which was his first loss after 20-some fights, then he was scheduled to fight Manny Gonzalez. The Griffith fight was in August, which at the time was the largest crowd ever to see a fight at the Spectrum in Philly. They had 13,000 there. And he was scheduled to fight Manny Gonzalez in November at the Arena. And the fight was postponed for some reason. And then when it was rescheduled, Gypsy Joe didn't show up or showed up late for the pre-fight press conference. And Herman Taylor, who was promoting the fight, went up to him and said, you know, you can't be doing this. And basically, Gypsy Joe told him to go fuck off. And then all of a sudden, they discovered he was blind in one eye. Herman Taylor was a powerful man in Philly.
And they had this hearing at the commission where one of the guys that was on the commission had a glass eye, and nobody knew it. He popped it out, and that sort of turned the vote against Gypsy Joe. But basically what they were doing, they were giving him a death sentence.
I mean, he beat really good guys. So, and he's fighting with one eye. So when they took that away from him, boxing was his whole life, and he turned to drugs.
That really killed him mentally.
Yeah.
You know, he didn't care about none. He hung on the corners, drinking everything after that, you know.
But he was a good fighter. He was a very good fighter. You know, if he kept his head on straight, did the right thing, stay away from that street world and everything, he might have been champion. But he would have been champion because he beat Coates before in a 10-round fight. And he sure would have beat him in the 15.
He's almost the epitome of the what could have been story. Because as good as he was, literally fighting one-eyed. So imagine how good Gypsy Joe would have been with two good eyes. It's a tragedy, but then you also admire what he really did and what he really had to go through to get to the position he got to.
I remember going to his funeral. It was at a little row home in North Philly. There couldn't have been 30 people there, 20 people. And here's a guy who drew thousands, was selling out the arena, 6,000, 4 or 5 times a year. There could have been 20 or 30 people there.
That's amazing.
And I heard a line that night from his, one of his sisters that I'd never heard before. And it may have been used in a lot of funerals at the time. He said, The day he died, it rained, which meant God was crying.
Did it rain that day? Was it raining?
Okay, this is the first of 2 discs of Gypsy Joe Harris. Has never been seen before. Watch this. They can't be lent out, they can't be sold, but he's allowed me to show them tonight. You're going to see what it was like to hang out inside of the arena in West Philly. Look at that. On fight night. Hanging out there was as much fun as going inside. No air conditioning. Where was it at? 45th and Market. That's George Patton, man. Sonny Liston for a while, and Gil Turner.
Tell me what it was like to see your dad on film.
I've seen one film, and it wasn't either one of those. So that's 3 total now. And it felt good actually seeing him put in his work.
So tell me what it was like to see Gypsy Joe in action.
It was super exciting because he's one of these guys who, to me, it's like just a ghost. Like I've read about him, I've seen photos of him. I saw one extended clip, like a highlight reel of his last fight with Emile Griffith, but that was it. And that wasn't the best footage. So I was super excited about tonight because we were going to get to see, you know, really quality stuff that I didn't even know existed, especially the Kitten Haywood fight. They were 2 of my favorites, and you know, Kitten Haywood, you know, was riding high in his career, and Gypsy Joe was like an upstart, and it's the fight that made Gypsy Joe.
All these years later, he's still drawing a crowd. What does that mean to you?
To me, it's amazing. I see his talent on stage. He was talented. He was gifted like that.
How did your brother get into boxing?
Because
what got him started?
What got him started? Me. All the time. And then he get in fights. She would say, "Go down there and get in the fight with your brother." I said, "Oh boy, I'm tired of this." So I told him, I said, "Look, you better go fight for your own. I'm tired. Go around the corner to the gym somewhere." So he went. That's how he started fighting.
Well, one of the things about Gypsy Joe is, I mean, he's before my time. I never saw him fight. If I talk to someone who watched him fight, everybody I've ever talked to says the same thing. They light up and they say he was the most entertaining, like exciting guy to watch, but just like he made people really happy. So he's one of these guys who's, you know, one of the better fighters that came out of Philly.